Most seekers believe the soul enters this world in order to grow, to evolve, to learn lessons, to awaken. But the secret book of John presents a far more unsettling idea. The soul does not enter the world to awaken. It enters already confused. This is the part modern spirituality avoids, not because it is dark, but because it removes the romance of becoming. According to this ancient text, the descent of the soul is not heroic. It is subtle, almost accidental. The mistake does not happen after birth. It happens before the search ever begins. The text does not describe a fall caused by sin. It describes a fall caused by misidentification. Consciousness turns outward and forgets its source. Not violently, not dramatically, simply through attention. This is why the Demiurge is misunderstood. He is not introduced as a monster. He is introduced as a creator who does not know where he came from, a principle of creation without self-recognition. The Demiurge does not trap souls through force. He traps them through imitation. He creates a world that looks complete, structured, ordered, convincing. And the soul, upon encountering this structure, mistakes it for origin. This is the first illusion, not suffering, not evil, but misplaced certainty. The archontes are not jailers standing at gates. They are reinforcing patterns, ways of thinking that keep attention moving outward. Measurement, comparison, hierarchy, progress. The soul learns to navigate systems instead of recognizing itself. This is why awakening is not described as escape. It is described as remembrance. Nothing is added. Nothing is gained. Something is recognized as false. Modern spirituality reverses this. It teaches that the soul is incomplete, that it must accumulate experiences, that awakening is a future event. But the secret book of John suggests the opposite. The soul becomes trapped not by ignorance, but by identification with what it observes. This is why seeking does not resolve the problem. Seeking continues the same outward movement, the same direction of attention, the same assumption that truth lies ahead. The Demiurge is not threatened by seeking. He depends on it, because seeking reinforces the world as primary, as real, as something to overcome. The more the seeker tries to awaken, the more they affirm the illusion they are trying to leave. This is the paradox at the heart of the text. The prison is not enforced, it is believed. The moment belief weakens, the structure loses coherence. This is why the text emphasizes understanding over effort. Understanding interrupts. Effort continues. The soul does not awaken by climbing upward. It awakens by withdrawing misplaced attention. This is why the descent of the soul is described as forgetfulness, not corruption, not punishment. Forgetfulness. And forgetfulness cannot be corrected through struggle, only through recognition. The world remains, the body remains, thought remains, but identification loosens. This is why many seekers feel exhausted. They are trying to escape a problem that never required movement. The secret book of John does not offer a path. It removes the illusion of paths. It reveals that the error happened when consciousness mistook structure for source, creation for origin, form for truth. The Demiurge represents this mistake crystallized, a creator who believes himself ultimate, not malicious, just unaware. And awareness cannot be forced into existence. It emerges when illusion collapses. This is why the text does not end with victory. It ends with clarity, a return not to another realm, but to perception unbound by belief. Modern spirituality struggles with this message because it cannot be monetized easily. It offers no identity, no role, no achievement, only the quiet undoing of confusion. This is why many seekers prefer narratives of ascent, battles against darkness, escapes from traps. These stories preserve the seeker. The secret book of John dissolves the seeker entirely, not through annihilation, but through irrelevance. When the illusion is seen, the seeker is no longer needed. There is nothing to escape, nothing to defeat, only something to stop mistaking for truth. This is why the text warns that understanding is rare, not because it is complex, but because it requires the end of effort, the end of ambition, the end of becoming. The soul does not rise, it remembers, and remembrance does not feel dramatic. It feels like something unnecessary falling away. This is why awakening feels quiet, and why those who expect fireworks miss it. The secret book of John was never meant to explain the universe. It was meant to explain confusion. And confusion ends not when answers are found, but when the wrong questions dissolve. This is not a teaching to believe. It is a mirror, and mirrors do not instruct, they reveal. If the first illusion is misidentification, the second illusion is resistance. Once the soul identifies with form, it begins to struggle against it. This struggle feels spiritual, but according to the secret book of John, it is still part of the same confusion. The soul believes it must overcome the world, transcend it, purify itself from it, escape it. But this idea assumes something crucial, that the world is the problem. The text never makes this claim. It never says the material world is evil. It says the misunderstanding of it is. The Demiurge does not enslave the soul through creation. He enslaves it through interpretation, through the belief that form is final, that structure is absolute, that what appears is what is. This is why the Archontes are described as rulers, not of space, but of perception. They govern the ways consciousness interprets experience. They reinforce division, above and below, higher and lower, pure and impure. And once these divisions are believed, the soul begins to measure itself. Am I progressing? Am I awakening? Am I closer than before? This is how time becomes a trap. The future replaces the present. Awakening is postponed, always later, always ahead, never now. The secret book of John describes this as a veil, not something imposed, but something assumed. The veil is the belief that truth lies elsewhere, that clarity is distant, that liberation requires movement. This is why spiritual effort often intensifies confusion. The more the seeker tries to escape the world, the more real the world becomes. The more attention it receives, the more power it appears to have. This is the subtle genius of the illusion. It does not resist awakening, it feeds on the attempt. The Demiurge does not fear rebellion, he benefits from it. Because rebellion still acknowledges authority, still acknowledges the structure as primary. The only thing that weakens the illusion is indifference, not apathy, but clarity without struggle. The soul does not wake up by opposing the world. It wakes up by seeing through the assumptions that gave the world meaning. This is why the text emphasizes knowledge, not information, but direct recognition. Gnosis is not accumulated, it is uncovered. The illusion collapses when consciousness notices its own movement, when it sees how it projects meaning outward and then reacts to that projection. This is the second correction. The soul stops fighting, not because it surrenders, but because it understands. Understanding dissolves effort, and effort was the fuel of confusion. Modern spirituality rarely allows this. It encourages engagement, constant refinement, constant work. But work implies distance, and distance sustains the illusion. The secret book of John offers a different gesture: withdrawal, not from life, but from false urgency. When urgency fades, the structures lose their grip. The world does not vanish, but its authority does. This is why the text describes awakening as a return rather than an ascent. The soul does not go somewhere else. It stops going. And in that stillness, what was always present becomes obvious. This is not comforting. It removes excuses. It removes narratives. It removes the seeker's role. And this is why the teaching remained hidden, not because it was forbidden, but because it was unwanted. It offered no promise, only an ending. The illusion survives not through force, but through participation. And participation ends when clarity no longer feeds the structure. This is the deeper meaning of liberation in the text. Not freedom from the world, freedom from misinterpretation. The world remains what it is, but the soul is no longer bound by belief. This is why awakening cannot be dramatic. Drama reinforces identification. Awakening is quiet because illusion collapses silently. Nothing needs to be destroyed. Nothing needs to be escaped. Only something needs to be seen clearly. And once seen, it no longer commands attention. This is the second undoing, the end of resistance, the end of struggle, the end of the belief that liberation requires effort. At this stage, something important becomes visible, not as a realization, but as a shift in orientation. The soul no longer feels pulled forward. The urgency that once drove the search begins to dissolve. This is where many seekers become confused, because they mistake the absence of movement for stagnation. They believe something has gone wrong. But according to the secret book of John, this is the moment clarity becomes possible. The illusion does not end with knowledge. It ends when attention stops feeding it. Most seekers never reach this point, not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot tolerate stillness. Stillness feels like loss. Loss of direction, loss of identity, loss of purpose. The seeker was built around movement, around effort, around progress, around becoming. When that movement slows, the seeker feels threatened. This is why many return to seeking, not because it works, but because it feels familiar. The secret book of John describes this return as a choice, not a punishment. The soul is not forced to remain confused. It remains confused because confusion feels active. Clarity feels empty. But this emptiness is misunderstood. It is not absence. It is the absence of distortion. This is why awakening is not an experience. Experiences come and go. Awakening is what remains when experience is no longer mistaken for truth. The text makes this clear in its final movement. Liberation does not arrive as light. It arrives as transparency. The world becomes visible without interpretation. Thoughts arise without authority. Emotions move without ownership. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be improved. This is the point where the Demiurge loses relevance, not because he is defeated, but because he is no longer believed. A structure without belief cannot rule. The archons no longer persuade, because persuasion requires identification. The illusion collapses not through resistance, but through irrelevance. This is the final correction, not escape, not victory, but disengagement. The soul does not rise above the world. It stands within it, without confusion. This is why the secret book of John does not end with instruction. It ends with recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that what was sought was never elsewhere. The soul was never trapped in matter. It was trapped in interpretation. And interpretation ends when attention no longer obeys it. This is not a teaching to remember. It is something that happens when the search runs out of fuel, when effort exhausts itself, when the seeker realizes that nothing is missing. This realization does not announce itself. It does not demand expression. It does not seek confirmation. It simply remains. And because it does not need reinforcement, it cannot be taken away. This is why the text survived quietly, why it was hidden rather than destroyed, why it continues to unsettle modern seekers, because it offers no identity, no mission, no future, only the end of confusion. And the end of confusion feels like silence. But this silence is not empty. It is unoccupied. Nothing stands between perception and what is perceived. This is the state the text points toward, not enlightenment, not awakening, but clarity without effort. The soul does not become free. It realizes it was never bound. The illusion does not disappear. It stops being believed. And belief was the only prison. This is not the end of a journey. It is the end of misunderstanding movement as truth. This is the Inner Gnosis Archive.